Guys, my time is on the clock, 9 o'clock, and I come today with a somber message. A message that has pushed me to actually make it not on an informative basis, but a basis of activism. You know that over the past few days, weeks, I've been talking about African unity, the importance of African unity. In parallel to that, on my page, I've been talking about the same thing, but more importantly, xenophobia in South Africa. I've been talking about how South Africa needs to become a part and parcel of Africa, begin to identify itself as part of Africa, and begin to understand the importance of uniting for the purpose of ensuring that Africa has got opportunity and potential to grow. We've got 15 people. I'll just continue to make an introduction as we wait for more. Now, as I had this discussion on my page, the one thing that always happens when you are a foreigner in South Africa, particularly a black foreigner, is that you are muzzled from talking. The moment you talk, there is this, we need to put you in your place type of response. A type of response to any contribution that you can give, and worse still, if you make a criticism of South Africans or the context in South Africa. This, of course, is not in the spirit of the Constitution. So this week, I made a post, one that I posted here, and a number of posts on my wall where I am challenging the transformation in South Africa. And I'm specifically challenging the issue of transformation in South Africa because of the context of what is beginning to happen for those of us with the prescience to see. There is a recession in South Africa. There are people losing jobs. And as this continues to happen, the strain and the stress and antagonism between nationals and foreigners goes unabated. And with that, I have then been told to shut up and threatened with deportation by people that feel that what I'm saying is insulting to South Africa. Despite the fact that I am a resident in South Africa for 19 years, my children are South Africans, born to South African mothers, and therefore I've got a vested interest for South Africa. I've been threatened with deportation. I've been told that high-ranking people shall be talked to so that I can be deported because I have no respect for the country in which I live. That, ladies and gentlemen, is veiled xenophobia. It is discrimination based on ethnicity. I don't have a say, even though the Constitution gives me the right to speak, because I am not a South African. Even if I'm naturalized in South Africa, I'm still looked at as a foreigner as long as I'm black. However, on the opposite side, the white South African, the white European South African, has got the right to speak, criticize, denigrate, and no one has an issue with that. They own most of the radio stations to speak and denigrate this very same country and the black population, but it's not an issue. So this brings me to the sentiments that worried me over the weekend. The Deputy Minister of Police made a press release or a press conference in which he highlighted a number of issues, but when I captured it at a point where he was talking about foreign nationals. The problem with the message is that the message seemed to criminalize being foreign. The message sounded divisive. It sounded like it was a message from the era of Goebbels or something that I expect to have heard in Rwanda just before the genocide. Foreigners were earmarked as the problem and causes of crime in South Africa. He also intimated that foreigners seem to be the reason why there is no progress economically for South Africans. One of the statements as he started his video was, how can the city in South Africa be 80% foreign nationals? That's dangerous. That in Hillbrow, South Africans have surrendered their own city. Now those words sound to me like words that are creating a context and a narrative of a threat to South Africa, a threat to South Africans. And that threat to South Africa and South Africans is the foreign nationals. He goes on to say, you won't go into any city and see South Africans being 80% of that city. Because if we don't debate this as South Africans, then the entire country could be dominated by foreign nationals and the next president could be a foreign national. The threat has been escalated into the aspect that foreigners are here to take over. Now let me create a context for you. The foreigners that live in Hillbrow are African foreigners, black foreigners. And just like there are black foreigners from diverse countries living in Hillbrow, you also have communities of white foreigners in South Africa, with Sandringham and areas like that, Jewish communities. You've got Indian communities. You've got Asian communities. You've got Chinese communities in places like Bedford View. You have got Greek communities. You've got Afrikaner communities, and the farming areas generally in South Africa are Afrikaner farming communities. He goes on to say, and it is not xenophobic to talk the truth. We fought for this country from the white minority. We cannot surrender it to foreign nationals. Now understand that this South Africa that he says he fought for from white minority is 75%, 80% controlled by whites. You need to also understand that that minority of whites continue today to economically dominate this country by at least 75% of the economy being in their hands. You must also understand that the land is still in the hands of that very same minority. However, he makes it clear that the danger in South Africa is foreign nationals taking over. Taking over the presidency of the country. He goes on to say, the arms that are being used here in Hillbrow are arms of war. The hijacking of buildings here in Hillbrow is a sign of taking over power. So these are now the things that the foreigners are doing to take over South Africa, allegedly, which is the hijacking of buildings in inner cities, Johannesburg or Hillbrow, and the issue of using weapons of war. For me, this language is very dangerous. This language makes foreigners a threat, and it bundles all foreigners into one group in which all those foreigners are automatically assumed as a danger to the South Africans. Foreigners coming into South Africa and finding residency in Hillbrow, probably only being able to afford to stay in Hillbrow, probably staying in Hillbrow so that they can be among the safety of other foreigners, or probably staying in Hillbrow because that is the only place where accommodation was available, has become criminalized by the Deputy Minister of Police. What are these words supposed to do when South Africans hear them? In a context of a country that's got xenophobia, in a context of a country that's already got tenuous relationships between its citizens and black foreigners, what does this narrative seek to achieve? Now, I have to put a disclaimer and be honest and say, the last time that the Minister of Police highlighted Zimbabweans as criminals, I was one of the very first people to make a video into the Zimbabwean community to say, yes, I agree with him that a lot of priority crimes that are happening in South Africa are being done by Zimbabweans. And therefore, we as Zimbabweans cannot sit and be quiet, but we need to speak to our brothers and sisters to stop undertaking criminal activities, because then we become complicit with the criminals. A lot of Zimbabweans were very angry at me for making such a statement, because they wanted me to say, it cannot be described that the crimes are being done because people are Zimbabweans. And so crime is crime. I disagreed with them. But today, after looking at the narrative of the minister's speech, and then taking a listen to what his deputy is saying, it is becoming a narrative that seeks to be saying that foreigners are criminals. And the fact that today he talked about foreigners living in a certain area as being a problem and a threat to South Africa, he has actually criminalized foreign people and their residency in South Africa. I find that very problematic, and I find it shy of incitement of violence. How is it that South Africans are supposed to take this? And this is why today, a person that doesn't usually talk directly to issues of politics, I'm speaking directly to the issue of politics. Because it seems like there is a deliberate attempt by certain authorities in the country, people with influence over the masses, to utilize the foreign issue, the immigration issue, as a football. But a football that could have very dangerous repercussions and very dangerous connotations. When the mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba, came into office, the very first thing he did was to identify again foreigners as a problem. And one of the sets of foreigners that he identified as a problem were Nigerians. I agreed with him and made another video where saying there is a problem with drugs in our community, and there is a problem that there are certain foreigners, Zimbabweans included, Nigerians included, causing these criminal activities. And as a foreigner who's living in South Africa, I want to make an appeal to you, my brothers and sisters, to stop these activities. Stop utilizing the children of South Africans as prostitutes. These are your brothers and sisters. Stop undertaking criminal activity, fraud, drug dealing. However, having said that, it brought about a xenophobic action where houses were burnt, Nigerians were attacked, and now we are in a situation now where we're no longer talking about specific crimes and specific criminal activities. The aspect of of foreigners staying in a certain place is becoming criminalized. For me, those are reckless statements, dangerous statements. And the thing is, a lot of Zimbabweans, a lot of middle-class Zimbabweans, a lot of high-class Zimbabweans and high-profile Zimbabweans that are in South Africa will never stand up to speak about this issue. But it has been said time and again that bad things happen when good men keep quiet. Too many Zimbabweans are keeping their heads low. Too many Nigerians are keeping their heads low whenever xenophobia happens, because the people that suffer from that xenophobia are the poorest of the poor. And the issue is not South Africans or poor South Africans are wrong for their xenophobic actions. They are just pawns in a system where they are utilized to go against fellow poor people, to fight for peanuts, 2% of the economy, while being made not to look at the real issue that is causing these problems. Because we're in a recession in South Africa, white capital is holding 350 billion rands that they will not release into the economy. Whether it is intentional, whether they're consolidating capital, as I've always said, whether they're looking for new markets, whether it is a tactic for political change, we don't know. But all we know is that they're currently not investing in creating jobs, and they're currently not investing in growing the economy. Externalization continues to happen. Transfer pricing continues to happen. A bulk of South Africans' earnings and capital continues to leave to overseas markets, to European markets, and bank accounts overseas. But we don't see that as the problem, where 70 to 75% of the economy of a nation is controlled by 6% of the population, causing the poor masses, the ones that I told you don't have the option to grow their own food, the ones who are affected by poverty directly. When they don't have jobs, they can't buy that onion, they can't buy that mealie meal, they can't buy food, they can't buy the basics like bread and milk. And so therefore they're left with one option: to fight. Frantz Fanon talked about this phenomenon. He said that this phenomenon is a case where when a people are looking for liberation from oppressors, and in this case we're talking of economic oppression, they will begin to fight and release stress by killing each other. It will be easier for them to target their neighbors, to target their own, and kill each other first as a means of letting out the steam. But Fanon also made it clear that this will only happen for a certain time before people recognize and realize that the stress is not being let out. The stress is not being let out by bloodletting of my next poor companion. The oppression is unrelenting even though I've killed him. So sooner or later they begin to realize that this is not the solution. They will turn to religion to release their stress. They will turn to the spiritual to give themselves a feeling of calmness, but it will not take care of the biting oppression. And so eventually they will have to look and face their enemy. Sadly for us now is that the enemy is no longer just color. The enemy is class. You and me, the black middle class, have become part and parcel of the enemy of the poor. Because as we make our living, as we live our lifestyles, as we live this lifestyle of consumption and debt, we are actually sucking. We're actually vampires upon the poor. And we're utilizing our consumption to bolster those that are actually pillaging this economy for their benefit. Someone has challenged me and said, it is hate speech to say that white people are not citizens of South Africa. But I always say, when a people perpetuate a crime against a people, and they pillage those people, they conduct a genocide, they pillage them, they enslave them, and they earn a bounty from their crime. If those people do not make restitution, if those people do not take the bounty that they've made during crime and restitute and restore the people that they have oppressed and restore the unjust enrichment to the people that they have pillaged, they are accomplices of the crime. And if they are accomplices of a crime, and if foreigners, when they are in a country like me and I break the law, I am deported back to my country, or it cancels my citizenship, that should apply to the pillagers who have never restituted, to the pillagers who were given citizenship rights in South Africa by an illegitimate government. An illegitimate government that had a mandate of 6% of the population and didn't have a mandate from 94% of the population. A mandate that was given by laws that only suited and were created by that 6% of an illegitimate government. That automatically says to me, a people given citizenship rights, whose ancestors were given citizenship rights and naturalized into a country because of laws made by illegals, it is voidable. Their citizenship is challengeable. And if they don't return the bounty, the proceeds of bounty, then their citizenship is in question. However, never forget that most white people came to Africa on royal charter. Royal charter means that they were in service of the queens and kings of Europe. They came here with a mandate to rape, pillage, and export or fly out all the proceeds back to Europe, while they remain here to administer the interest of Europe for the benefit of Europe. If these white people have not distributed the wealth that they've made during slavery, during the commission of a crime, and if these white people continue to hold on to their proceeds and today are pinching those proceeds and not willing to let the economy grow, not willing to reinvest where they've been exploiting, when they continue to grow as a group project alone, when they continue to give opportunity only to white people, leaving 90% of the economy in destitution to the extent that today again, xenophobia, The poor South African versus the poor foreigner is about to be another weapon utilized. That is problematic. And we must never forget that the laws that legitimized their pillage can be questioned. For the law should not make an illegality legal over time. Not only that, the question is the men that negotiated this CODESA agreement, this agreement that allowed the victim to be the judge of his perpetrator and allowed those victims who sat and presided to forgive their perpetrator and get rewarded bountifully. The question is, were those men capable or able to negotiate in good faith? Or were they operating and making a contract under duress? Did they have an option to refuse the terms that were on the table and go back into apartheid and go back into prisons? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves. But anyway, before I go, I am concerned about what this minister said, the deputy minister. He goes on to talk about the dominance of foreign nationals in illegal trade and also businesses that are here in Hillbrow are economic sabotage, because it is us, South Africans, who are supposed to be running those businesses. Again, the reflection is on black businesses, the businesses of the poor. There's no question as to who owns the banks. There's no question as to the business conducted by multinationals, by European companies, foreign investors here in South Africa as economic sabotage. It is the economic sabotage of black foreigners that is sabotage, because those are activities that should be done by black South Africans. We are facing here service delivery protests that we do not know where they are coming from. Some of the issues is because we do not have shelter to give our people, because our buildings are being hijacked and occupied by people and lunatics that we don't know. The foreigner is objectified. Now he's a thing. Now he's a lunatic. Now he's a thing that is not known. Before I go, I want to know, has the minister or the deputy minister conducted a survey, a research, to fully ascertain that Hillbrow actually consists of 80% of foreigners? And has he ascertained that those 80% of foreigners that are living in Hillbrow, are they there because they've pushed South Africans out by force, or were they simply able to get a lease and pay the landlord? Has he also ascertained that the landlords that have buildings and are hijacking buildings in Johannesburg are actually foreigners? Because I struggle to believe that in a nation with people that fight and kill their fellow Africans in xenophobic incidences, Africans have the power to take over buildings in Hillbrow without repercussions from the locals. I also struggle with this description of all crime in Hillbrow being foreign. These are issues that we need to discuss and tackle as a community of foreigners and diasporans. This is a message that you guys must share. It is a message that must get out into the greater African diaspora, and one in which we need to start re-asking ourselves whether this current government with the best constitution in the world, a government that our country sacrificed to ensure that it got independence, is becoming exactly like the apartheid government. Are they becoming people who want to develop apart and alone by segregation of fellow Africans? And are they utilizing the poor African, including poor South Africans, as bait for political expedience? This is an issue that is capable to make people like myself become activists. I don't want to be an activist. But when it is that fellow Africans will sacrifice poor Africans to maintain a status quo for a middle class and maintain a status quo for pillagers and Europeans, a situation where blacks see other blacks as a threat. They fear other Africans, but they don't fear the Boers that are in farms practicing with all sorts of firearms, training themselves for an eventuality of fighting South African black people. That's problematic. The weapons caches that Boers have out there, the training of special forces, the training of mercenaries that go all over the world homing in their skills, the Jews that they don't see as a threat who go back to Israel to train with special forces and the Shirat Mitikal, and then today they only look at Africans as a threat. Good night. Spread the message before this turns into another xenophobic incident. Put pressure on politicians that you know to start having dialogue with the South African government, to start having dialogue with this rhetoric that is poised to destroy not only foreigners' lives, but the lives of poor South Africans who are just trying to get a living. Thank you.